Shortest, and I'm just going to take a little bit of your time, talk about the future of transportation. And, you know, the title kind of describes this, how and why railroads are the future. And I hope you'll leave this evening with a little better idea of what's going to go down in custom optimism. So, let's go back in time a little bit. You think about a railroad. You're probably thinking about a lot of things in this picture. Here we've got a steam locomotive. It's hauling merchandise freight, mostly boxcars probably. It's also in the wide open plains in Wyoming and in the American West. So this is not the freight train of today. Those of you who have observed things just north of campus here or in your hometowns, that sort of thing, know that this is not the freight train of today for quite a few reasons. One, there's no steam locomotives to speak of in revenue service anymore. And two, this has changed predominantly. So when I say a manifest freight system, this is what I mean. Basically, from about 1840 to 1950, the freight car system worked primarily with box cars and other simple terms of freight. So what that meant was that the trains were formed predominantly of a whole bunch of different kind of cars that were going to a whole bunch of different destinations. And each trip was producer to customer and done exclusively with rail. And if it wasn't, it was going to the same destination with rail. So for example, you know, I shipped couches from Bend, Oregon to Ames, Iowa. So I would make the couches. I would either have my own rail siding in Bend and load them from there, or I might take them to the local warehouse and they would either be stored and then loaded. They would be loaded onto a boxcar. They would make their way here on a variety of trains, and then when they got here, they would be spotted in the same manner, either at the end customer or a location very close by. So this worked really well until this happened. And maybe not really well. Really well isn't necessarily the greatest way to describe it, but it's what worked. And if you think about it, what advantages does a truck have? Well, I'm kind of biased, but there's one main one that made it why this thing was king from 1950 to about 2005. And it can go anywhere, because the network of roads after Dwight D. Eisenhower was up here, and the railroad infrastructure was somewhere down here. So you didn't need to like, you know, when I ship my couches again, they can go directly here, right? Because I don't have to go up to Seattle and then over to Chicago and then back down here and get sorted a bunch of times in the yards. This guy can get on I-84 and then 80 and then 35 and boom, there you go, right? So efficiency, how companies save money. It's how they get their bottom line. It's what drives pretty much everything in the business world. But as fuel prices increased, you know, people started realizing, well, what are the benefits of rail? Like, how can we utilize those? So let's talk about them a little bit. And really, the main one I've already said is efficiency. It goes down to physics. Force of friction, yo. So like, friction, steel to steel, much less than rubber to pavement. So what does that mean on the business side? Well, okay, what does that mean for the environment? It means less fuel and less emissions. So what does that mean on the business side? It means cost. That drives everything, like I've said before. So, how can we really use the versatility of trucking and the business side of rail, which is vastly superior to that of the truck? And so, you know, companies experimented. And there were some failed tennis. And really what it came down to is time. And time is money, and additional, movements are also money. So if you put roadway trailers on a flat car, that means that you're going to have to spot that flat car and spot those roadway trailers, and then have people, you're going to have to pay people big bucks to put them on the trailer. And so that just doesn't work. You might as well just ship it all the way in the truck, right? So what are you going to do? How are you going to get it so that you can have the best possible solution? And in the 1980s, they figured out a way. Intermodal. So how intermodal works is you take the main part of the truck and make it detached. Make it so it can go anywhere, and the truck can just stay and be where it needs to go. So, they're big boxes. These ones in this picture are 40 feet long. They fit on the back of a truck. They also fit in a rail car. And it first started with ocean-going shipping. How can you make it so that you can save time and thus save money by loading your goods once and having them stay in the same container for the duration of their journey? So when you make stuff in China, it gets loaded into a container, gets trucked to the port or railed to the port, depending on how far away that is. It gets put on the ship, it gets put off the ship, it gets put on a truck, it goes to the rail port, the train hauls it, it gets put back on a truck. All this can happen in a matter of seconds. That crane right there comes down, makes the move. Then boom, it's on the other mode. That is efficiency, like, right there. So, and what also was very much better was that the railroads figured out that they could stack two of these on top of each other and still not, like, have them hit stuff above. The clearance was still good. So, really what that means is if we have a 75 or 100 car intermodal train, that takes 150 to 200 trucks off the freeway. And that's a pretty big deal. So intermodal is what's going on right now, and it's what's going to be the future. If you look at what's up north of here on the Union Pacific main transcontinental line, we're talking big, like, trucks being taken off the highway. So this train has about 60 trains a day, about a third of that is intermodal. So if you say that's 20, and if each train takes 150 trucks off, that's 3,000 trucks that are not on I-80 every 24 hours. So let's put it to the test. Let's see if I actually know what I'm talking about, or if I'm just throwing stuff at you. So I want to ship a shipment from Carson, California to Joliet, Illinois. This is the premier intermodal lane, so something that will come up in a little bit. 50,000 pounds, that's not really a big deal. But here we got two routes. The red is the truck, can get trucked up I-15 to I-70 to I-80, or it can go on a train for most of its journey through the southern part and via Kansas City. So let's look at the benefits. Let's do a direct cross comparison, and I used Hub Group, which is an intermodal shippers website, to come up with this data. So, transit time. Normally, rail is a little bit more, just because of the nature of the service. But on the LA to Chicago corridor, it's negligible. Intermodal transit time of 4.1 days. Highway, 4 days. This is where the big stuff comes in. You're going to have about half the CO2. 36, 34 pounds per load on the intermodal, 68, 47 pounds on the highway. And then I did a very, very rough cost estimate, which, assuming a semi-truck gets about 140 miles per gallon per ton, a train gets about 450 miles per gallon per ton, it's about 2,000 miles. Diesel price is about $1.90, although the railroads get it for cheaper. So we're talking $6.78 and some change to ship it via truck, about $2.11 for rail. So you save $467.46 in just fuel costs. That doesn't take into account the fact that you have to pay a driver to drive your shipment, when you have a rail train, you really only have 2 dudes do it. And it's still a male-dominated industry. and although they're not going to hand all the savings to you as the customer, they're going to hand you a decent amount. So this is really how it works, and this is what would happen if I were actually a customer who wanted to ship my load from the Los Angeles area to Chicago area. So if I start out here in Carson, you know, it could get on with a truck. It would be more efficient right here in the area because it can get right on its way to Joliet faster. However, if it's going to ship by rail, it's got to go up here to the intermodal terminal just west of LA, and then it's going to go on its journey. We're talking, if we talk about Chicago, Joliet's way south, and so the truck can get there faster. It has to go here to the Canal Street Intermodal Terminal and then come down. But it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, right? Because the majority of your journey, you know, 1,800 miles probably, if not more, is being shipped on the more efficient way. So how is this not a good idea? That's really what I'm saying. How is it that we won't do this? This is the future. This is how we're going to come. This is how things are going to work. And here's some reasons why. These are 3 main reasons that I thought of. So peak oil, that's probably the biggest one. Gas prices are low right now, but just because of the trend and nature of fossil fuels being a finite resource, we know that's not going to be the case for the future, no matter how much Sarah Palin actually drills out of the ground. So we will need to be more efficient if we want the price of our goods to at least stay moderately where it is, or about where it is for inflation. Lack of truck drivers. This has been a problem since even before the Great Recession. People don't want to drive long-haul trucks anymore because it sucks. Among other reasons, the pay is actually pretty decent, but you're on the road for weeks, over a week at a time. In crumbling infrastructure, our current Congress has kind of decided that funding traditional things isn't a good idea. So far, we're seeing that that's not happening. On the flip side of that, the railroad industry is the money that goes into that, about 98% of it is private investment, 2% government, plus or minus. So it really doesn't matter what Rand Paul wants to do, it's still going to go down. We're still going to have an economy. So this is the future. This is what I'm going to be working on. I hope you'll, if you have an opportunity to support intermodal, support rail transportation, and I hope I gave you a little optimism about the fact that the future of our shipping economy may not change drastically as much as some people say. Any questions or anything?